Well, thousands of protesters have gathered in Tel Aviv to express their anger at the Israeli government and to demand the removal of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Family members of those killed on October the 7th also attended. They blamed the government for security failures ahead of the attack by Hamas. Activists gathered under a large sign that read, "Bring them home," referring to captives held in Gaza. Bernard Smith was at the demonstration.
Relatives and friends of supporters of the captives in Gaza are here every night, but on a Saturday night it's the main one, and this is the 12th Shabbat, as Israelis call it, that they've had to do this. Now, of course, last Saturday all the hope and the talk was about the prospects for a possible ceasefire. We know we were talking about how Qatari, American and Israeli officials had met on one side, how representatives from Hamas had met Egyptian security officials in Cairo, and how there was a suggestion that Israel was offering a one-week ceasefire in return for about 40 captives, particularly women, the elderly and the sick, and how Hamas was demanding a complete ceasefire, a cessation of all hostilities before they would go any further. Well, it's gone pretty quiet since then. We've not heard much in recent days, and there is enormous frustration from the relatives and the friends here. People have been talking about how they want them released now. We've had one former army admiral in the Navy saying that we should propose a prisoner release that Hamas will not turn down. Every day is a nightmare for the captives. And of course the psychological fear that their relatives or friends are dying in Gaza. At least 6 captives have been reported dead this week. There's no proof of their death, but those are the reports coming from Gaza, and it scares people.
Well, Gideon Levy is a columnist at the newspaper Haaretz. He joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Good to have you with us. Let's start with the spike in the casualty toll and the death toll of Israeli soldiers in Gaza. What kind of impact is that having on public opinion there?
It is growing, but it doesn't have yet an impact on the support of the vast majority of Israelis in continuing this war. When we speak about the casualties, I cannot prevent saying something personal. In this weekend, there were 600 Palestinians killed in Gaza. So 13 soldiers is a hell of a price for Israel. But let's not lose proportion. 600 people in Gaza in this weekend.
A big number indeed. Gideon, we've seen protesters out on the streets in Israel. The pressure, no doubt, is building on Netanyahu. How long do you think it can last?
You see, Sami, the pressure is less than it seems from the outside. I'm quite surprised that the pressure until now is limited. We are after a year of a protest against Netanyahu, and in those times it was much, much bigger and stronger and more vocal and more influential. There is a certain pressure concerning only one issue, releasing the hostages. All the rest is untouched. I mean, obviously, the sacrifice of Gaza doesn't interest anybody in Israel, but even losing soldiers, which is so horrible for every family and every individual, is not leverage right now for a growing process. Not yet. No, a protest, growing protest, not yet.
The operation hasn't been able to release captives so far. The only captives who have been released were done through a deal. What's your overall analysis of the military operation? Is it failing to achieve its military objectives?
I never thought so, Sami. From the beginning, I thought that, first of all, Israel has to make a choice, has to have its priorities. Either crashing Hamas, will it mean whatever it means, or releasing the hostages. You cannot have them both. And Israel misled the people, the government, the army, as if both are going hand to hand, but that's not the case. We are reaching a point in which it's very clear that Israel is preferring now continuing the war over releasing the hostages. And this must be said. It's a very cruel choice.
But Gideon, when we talk about crushing Hamas or releasing the captives, they've achieved neither so far, right?
They achieved very little, for sure, relatively to the price that it's being paid, that was paid in terms of human lives, destruction, hatred toward Israel all over the world. I mean, those all things will be counted after the war and evaluated after the war. And the price is so heavy and the achievements so far are so done.
Where do you think overall this strategy will lead? Will it lead to a situation where Israel will be forced, because of eventual build-up of external international pressure, to end this campaign in Gaza without having released the captives, without having destroyed Hamas, and having lost a lot of global support?
So first of all, Sami, I don't see this pressure working until now because there is not a real pressure. As long as the Americans are letting Israel continue the war, and they are letting Israel continue the war, there is not a meaningful pressure over Israel. Yes, the Americans pay their lip service in terms of try to kill as little civilians as you can. Very nice, very human, very liberal. But Israel is continuing, obviously, totally ignoring this advice from the White House. And I don't see a pressure. When it will turn into a real pressure, Israel will have to stop. And it's very clear that this stage is not too far. But the question, Sami, what comes next? Okay, Israel will stop the fighting. And then what? Israel will withdraw from the Gaza Strip and leave it to become a Somalia. Who is going to replace the Israeli army? Nobody in Israel has answers for this.
What do you make of the suggestions that Israel is working on establishing a buffer zone? There has been discussion about that. Does that necessitate Israel leaving behind troops along the eastern and northern border of Gaza?
It's unbelievable how Israel never learns anything. I mean, we had this buffer zone for years in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon. It didn't help anything, and it brought us to more and more wars. The problem in Gaza is that all Gaza is so narrow that if you cut now a buffer zone, what will be left for the 2.3 million people to live? And do we really believe that we will be more protected with a buffer zone after we build this unbelievable barrier for billions of dollars, which was supposed to guarantee total security to Israel? Nothing will guarantee security. Buffer zone, another barrier under the surface, behind the surface, above the surface. By the end of the day, we have to get to any kind of a political settlement. If not, we will continue from war to war.
Thank you very much, Gideon Levy, for your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Sami.